Welcome to the AI version of the presentation that Michael Prasad made for the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University's second Pracademic Emergency Management and Homeland Security Summit, which was held on May 18, 2026. I'm Christopher, an AI-generated voice to read Mike's speaker notes. This presentation is copyrighted by the Center for Emergency Management Intelligence Research and may not be reproduced, rebroadcasted, or published in any other way without the written permission of the author. Hello everyone. And before I start, I want to thank Dean Seidschlag as well as the faculty and staff of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University for hosting this second annual Pracademic Emergency Management and Homeland Security Summit. I presented last year on a totally different topic, but the one I am presenting now has quickly caught my attention for several reasons I will cover in my time today. This graphic helps set the stage for our conversation. Emergency management views the result of hazards from threats as incidents. And the size and scale of incidents results in the size and type of incident response. FEMA has this from type 5 being the least resource dependent to 1 being the most. And the concept of an extinction level event or ELE, what has been described as a type 0 incident, is based on further details in a paper I wrote which was published in 2023 at Pracademic Affairs, originally at the Naval Postgraduate School, but now on Homeland Security Today. The extinction level event part was sourced from Matheny's 2007 paper, Reducing the Risk of Human Extinction, from Risk Analysis. All of these citations, as well as others, will be included in the notes. 3 important caveats we should all keep in the back of our minds. First, we all know that no people, places, or things are subject to singular incidents. Disasters don't put themselves on hold while another disaster is finishing its destruction. And they are not all linear, certainly not for emergency management. That's actually one of the prime subjects of my Pracademic Affairs paper, but also something to think about in the context of today's presentation. I also like to consider that emergency management is a process and a set of models covering the who, what, when, why, and how. The where is everywhere, of course. I also consider Homeland Security to be distinct from emergency management, with a focus on a very specific set of human-made threats, namely terrorism. Second, emergency management planners always consider the what if it gets worse than what we have resources for. You see this in emergency responders too. Bring more resources than what you expect to use. If you are a consequence manager, you will always consider what could become worse than your worst best case scenario. One of the reasons FEMA does not have a Type 0 incident is because it is not the role of FEMA to help support states, tribes and territories with Type 0 incidents. These cannot be managed through emergency management alone. COVID-19 was the last example of this need for whole-of-government support. And finally, I am using the existing legal frameworks and constructs in the United States. Much of what I am covering is unique to the US, but some of the research has been based on models from other countries already in place. And none of this presentation is based on our current international armed conflict in the Middle East. It is in fact based on planning from at least 2024, derived from the war between Russia and Ukraine and the quote, what if, unquote, NATO were to be brought into the fight, and thus the US as well, based on our treaty agreements with European nations. What if China attacked Taiwan? Our scene or scenario is war. That is the threat, the hazards we will cover today. Let's take a look at those 4 distinct circles of organizational staffing. The who does what? In the context of war and the protection of the United States homeland. The 2 on the left of national defense and civil defense have only historically kicked in upon a declared war by the United States. There is one major exception for the use domestically of national defense resources, which I will cover today. The 2 on the right, emergency management and homeland security, occur and exist in our homeland all the time, both in peacetime and will exist in wartime. There was no officially designated and defined homeland security group in the last declared war, which was World War II. It is amongst these 4 groups that the 32 core capabilities of the National Preparedness Goal, NPG, must be divided differently during wartime, as are the addition of any new core capabilities associated around the threat of war. The revised concept of civil defense is credited to Quinn Lucy, from his 2019 essay at Homeland Security Affairs. I certainly have lots of questions on how this will work operationally and tactically, more on that in a bit. For example, what entities or organizations, and at what level or levels of government, should be organized, equipped, trained, and exercised to be part of civil defense. And then there is the current legal status of who is in charge of these 4 groups. Who commands and controls. You can see how I have organized this, but Homeland Security and emergency management are different at the federal level than at the state level, and each state can be different from the other. As of March 2026, 23 U.S. states and territories maintain active state defense forces. Unlike the National Guard, these units are under the exclusive authority of their respective state governors and cannot be federalized or called into active duty by the President. FEMA is designated as supporting, not managing disasters through emergency management. DHS, on the other hand? Well, that has been quite a different model of management and missions since 2025. Here are those 32 core capabilities in the United States today, spread across the 5 mission areas, from the U.S. National Preparedness Goal. And a shameless plug for the Center for Emergency Management Intelligence Research: we disagree with the concept of intelligence and information sharing being limited to only the prevention and protection missions, as defined in U.S. policy. Why stop there? And if you go to www.samir.org, you will find out much more about that, as well as a special discount to our subscriber content I will cover at the end of this presentation. This construct could provide a great opportunity to fix some of the pitfalls of the current organization of core capabilities across the 5 mission areas, literal timeframes of before, during, and after incidents of scale. Right off the bat, several states have implemented or are considering the Incident Support Model or ISM for their emergency operations centers, rather than the U.S. National Incident Management System's Incident Command System or NIMS ICS. It could just as easily be any model of incident management system, including the ISM in the middle too. It should not matter when you consider that planning, operational coordination and public communication should be included in any model as being cross-coordinated amongst these 4 distinct organizational groups. I will add one more, which as previously noted, is intelligence and information sharing, and note this is much more in-depth and distinct as compared to situational awareness. And in all seriousness, from all of those after-action reports over the years, collectively we must place operational communications connecting all 4 boxes as well. If we are going to create something new, let's fix one of the issues which shows up in every improvement plan, and has not been successfully implemented across the board. The core capability of operational communications needs to exist in all the mission/disaster phases. GISIAN, InfraGuard, and CISA communications are perfect examples of this in the protection and prevention missions. Shares is a great example of how this can work in response and recovery. Here is how the current 32 core capabilities could be distributed across the 4 organizational groups, during wartime in protection of the homeland. This is what we are researching and delving into more detail over at the SAMR now. And you will see the same graphic symbol more than once, but in different colors. For example, critical transportation and infrastructure systems may need to be duplicated, one version for the military's needs and one for the civilian ones. And all of you are welcome to join in the discussion and advocacy efforts too. The idea here is that there are 2 new players in domestic homeland security and public safety, in an all hazards, all threats concept during war. In peacetime, national defense can and has historically played a role already. This is a slide from my HDIAC webinar. And by the way, this works both ways too. The private sector provides much-needed intelligence on emergency support functions or ESFS, many of which Title 10 and 32 defense forces can benefit from. And the safety of all responders is also the responsibility of Emergency Management's Unified Command. There can be challenges if intelligence is not curated and shared. As a recent example, civilian non-response role drones were impacting military helicopters in rescue missions in Kerr County, Texas in July of 2025. On the other hand, Healthcare Ready is a non-governmental organization which provides intelligence on public health impacts to U.S. disasters. Things like the status of dialysis centers and pharmacies in the impacted areas, impacts to the healthcare supply chain such as the Baxter Intravenous Solution Plant shutdown during 2024's Hurricane Helene. For this presentation so far all we have done is separate the existing 32 core capabilities amongst 4 groups, instead of the 3 current ones. Now let's talk about the reverse of DSCA, is civilian support to military operations, or CSMO. The 6 newly proposed core capabilities are border security, missile defense, defense of critical infrastructure, counter-narcotics, access to key terrain, and denial of adversary encroachment. We are going into a deeper analysis of these 6, over at our Substack for paid subscribers as well. And let's not forget the scenario we are in, it's a declared war. There is some question of whether this plan could be invoked during a presidentially declared national emergency, and that is something we will be researching and reporting on at our Substack for paid subscribers. It is also part of this scenario that the vast majority of the U.S. military are engaged in warfighting efforts outside of the homeland, effectively the continental United States, in terms of supporting the defense industrial complex. There is also a question of the legal and ethical precedent being established to prioritize said defense industrial complex on a national basis above any and all civilian missions. Towards this end, the plans include an expansion of the area of protection beyond military bases to include the communities and land which surrounds them, creating what is being called multi-domain resiliency zones. At the Center for Emergency Management Intelligence Research, we will be covering these as well. There is the distinct possibility that what we consider in emergency management as a mission statement may be adjusted ever so subtly, but with massive consequences to the way things work in peacetime. The top version is what is in place today, originated by FEMA Administrator Brock Long. Incidents of all types within the homeland are currently locally executed, state-managed and federally supported when approved. How would it look if the U.S. military is in charge of all four circles? If they decide that the defense industrial complex must be protected and supported above all others? What if it were to become locally executed, federally managed and state-supported? There's an old saying that the U.S. presidential seal gets changed when we are at war. When the eagle is facing the arrows of war instead of the olive branch of peace, the daily comings and goings in our country will be very different. And I for one want to be at the table discussing how that may all come about and how it could really work to protect our American way of life and government. At the Center for Emergency Management Intelligence Research's Substack site, we have packaged up our ongoing research and analysis on CSMO and other emergency management intelligence topics, for paid subscribers. You can first go to the link on the screen www.cmir.org and find a link to 20% off your first year's paid subscription rate. CSMO material is only available for paid subscribers. And you are welcome to use this QR code to request more information. A link to this form will also be available in the show notes. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about what the Center for Emergency Management Intelligence Research is working on, as it relates to the U.S. plans for civilian support of military operations within our homeland.